Glenn, Americans and American politicians don't tend to be very sympathetic to empirically based arguments. So given that we sort of have a noisier, I would imagine a noisier political system and discourse than they have in Portugal, what do you see as the first step toward translating the Portugal example to policy changes here?
Well, of all the events that Tim identified that suggest a significantly changing debate over drug policy, I actually think the most significant is what Jim Webb did last week. And I think that not because the bill that he introduced was particularly revolutionary. It wasn't. It just mandates a commission to study drug policy reform, although that's how Portugal approached the issue too, which was not simply to have a senator stand up and say, I'm in favor of decriminalization, as though it's an ideological belief, but to say we need to approach this rationally. Let's convene a commission and use the commission's conclusions and findings to guide what it is that we do. And I think it's premised in the belief that to take the drug policy debate out of the emotional, ideological, and moral realm and put it into the evidence-based realm, which is what Europe has done, is the prerequisite to transforming how we talk about these things. And I think that's true. But the thing that I think that was most significant about what he said is that I think there's one statistic that once Americans know, it really starts to affect them, which is that we have less than 5% of the world's population and close to 25% of the prison population around the world. That's an extraordinary discrepancy. It means that we are an extreme outlier as a nation of jailers. And I think the way Jim Webb phrased that is probably the most compelling in terms of changing the debate, which he said it means one of two things. Either we have a uniquely evil population, or our criminal justice system is profoundly flawed. And I think Americans are inclined to believe the latter much more than the former. And once you start getting people to accept that our criminal justice system is profoundly flawed, I think then the debate drastically opens up in terms of what it is that we're doing wrong. And that's when I think the findings of those commissions, the commission become much more, have a much higher potential to have an impact.
Can I say something on that?
Certainly.
I think it's important to understand the limits of the Portugal experiment. It is about the laws with respect to possession. If you ask what share of the 500 or 1,000 or so people who are in jail or prison for drug offences are there purely for drug possession, the answer is a very small number. Many people are listed as having pled to a possession offence. If you do surveys of prison inmates, they say they were in fact involved in the dealing and they simply pled to the lesser offence. So decriminalisation, I'm probably in favour of it, but the notion that this will make a large difference in the flow of incarceration related to drugs, I think is very implausible. This is going to have quite minor consequences for that.
Let's go in the back.
My name is Fabio Osterman. I'm from Brazil, currently at Georgetown University. And you mentioned that there's no serious political push in Portugal to return to the criminalization framework. What I'd like to know is there any movement towards the legalization in Portugal, and if there's not, I'd like to know why, because it seems kind of an incoherent movement to liberate the consumer while repressing the producers and the sellers as well.
Yeah, you're right about that, and I referenced earlier the fact that the commission, upon its formation, concluded almost immediately that legalization was not an option, because there are international treaties and conventions that are widely understood to compel member states and signatories to continue to maintain a legal prohibition against drug usage. And so I think it's probably true that legalization would be something that would be considered, given that the rationale that led to decriminalization would lead as well to legalization, at least arguably, if it hadn't been for these prohibitions. And I think more to the point, if you talk to EU policy officials, one of the things that they're very frustrated and angered by is that when they try and collaborate with Western countries, especially the United States, at least under the prior administration, the only thing the United States ever wants to talk about is how best to prosecute the glorious war, the war aspect of drug policy, and interdiction efforts, and almost no discussion whatsoever of reducing supply or reducing demand, rather, or harm reduction, or certainly decriminalization. So there's great pressure exerted on these countries by the United States and even by other EU member states to maintain their criminalization framework. And I think any attempt to actually consider legalization or move toward legalization would really result in heightened tensions and complaints and objections that Portugal is acting illegally and in violation